Welcome to Beach Jam Media, your resource-driven oasis with your host, Jennifer Corbin-Carson. Join us each week as we dive into hot topics and essential materials for individuals and businesses. We invite you to get your feet wet and explore life's offerings. From insightful discussions to practical advice, we're here to navigate the tides of change together. Come join us for Beach Jam Media, where knowledge flows endlessly and where the currents of insight never stop. So come on, let's get our feet wet and explore what's waiting for us on the beach.
With us, and without further ado, let's jump in and get our feet wet. Today, we are having a conversation with Dawn and Freddy. They are the owners of AMP2 Media. Good morning, Dawn and Freddy.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you guys this morning?
Excellent.
We're terrific. How are you doing? Thank you for having us.
Oh, well, I'm glad you could join us. Talk about pivoting. Wow. Chanel is not with us today because she's got some medical things going on. And so Dawn and Freddie had to pivot for us and join me on the show. I'm so glad you guys could be here.
We're so excited. We've got the whole studio pivoting because we pulled us from that to put somebody else on this, to go someone else on that. We're on our new summer program for the crew. So we're in a full, I can't even say pivot. We've done like a 180 here. We're like, zoop, but we're good. But we're good to go. They're learning on the fly.
Right. No, that's great. That's great. And I do appreciate it tremendously. But ironically, or maybe not, but that is the conversation that we were supposed to have today with Chanel, is about pivoting and how we pivot and how we react to it, right? So to start us off, I think COVID was the biggest pivot for us. So you guys as a business, how did you pivot during COVID?
COVID was a huge pivot for us because the Friday that everything shut down, we were actually on a live concert location. And there were supposed to be, 16,000 people there. And that was when the first warnings came in. And there were like 1,200, and no one really knew what was happening. So we were in a box away from everybody. We had the crew away, and everyone was spread out in the field. And then our Friday evening show, they were both on location. They said, can we both do this virtually with you from separate computers? We didn't have the capacity, we didn't have the technology on that Friday to have more than one person like you doing it. By that Monday, we were full up and rolling that we can have up to 8 on a camera because it had to be fully pivoted. Our executive producer, all technology had to come forward. We had to pull things that weren't really out. They were still in beta, so we could do everything we had to do virtually by Monday morning, but we were able to do it.
It actually became a pivot of necessity. Sometimes they tell you pivoting is nice because you change what you're doing, and you should always do that. And what it taught us was that we can't sit still. To be comfortable, you have to be uncomfortable. And to be successful, you have to be able to pivot when you least expect it. So for us, we actually improved, and we grew during COVID, and we survived. And we took as many of our friends and businesses and acquaintances, people that we didn't know, we told them, you have to pivot what you were doing to accumulate and get better. And you got to get better. And that's the name of the game. See, Dawn used to hate the word pivot. So we had to change it to get better. Because the true essence of pivoting is survival for us during COVID.
We pivoted for a while, and I think at one point we stopped pivoting and we continued to grow. And when you come see the studio where we're sitting right now, the way we're divided, this was event space, and we were using this for rentals for people to do lunch and learns and seminars, and we had all these folding chairs, and we built a stage, and our studios were on the other side of where we are. And during COVID, we had to transition this entire space now as our studio. And it was new technology, new sets, new furniture, more lights, more cameras, everything. So we have a full working studio now, and the event space means we have to clear it all out. But event space stopped, right? People weren't doing really networking events. We were doing everything
Right.
this way. So that's kind of how we've left it.
Right. I think for a business, though, pivoting to me, maybe it's my eternal optimism, but pivoting means that you're changing your path, but you're not but to be successful, right? So something's not working anymore, just like what you guys were saying. If something's not working, then you pivot or change something to be more successful, right? So you have to think outside the box. And Freddie, it's funny that you were talking about how to when you're comfortable and not comfortable. I tell them, so I am an archery coach, and I tell my archers, if you're doing it and you're comfortable, you're probably not doing it the right way.
That's correct.
So and same with business owners, right? We get comfortable where we're at, but then things slough off. I know in my business, I have a high season and I have a low season. And it's weird because right now is my high season. You would think, oh, okay, it's Christmas time or Valentine's Day or the holidays or whatever, but it's not. For me, the busy time is spring.
Can we
And
talk
but
about
I
your
am trained.
business?
Oh, my business, I have a printing and engraving business. So I do apparel, hats, tablecloths, things like that, all geared towards businesses. And that is where my transition is coming in, is that I am pivoting. So it started out getting my name out there because I do everything custom, right? I don't do anything. I do one-offs, but not very often anymore. But I was doing one-offs and things for individuals, and then in my business plan, I have what I really wanted to do was support small businesses. And that right now is where I'm pivoting to, because my name is out there and I am getting more business from small businesses. So, and I'm trying to support them and getting their name out there. And so I think Freddie and I were talking about a gentleman next door that does flags, that makes flags that you have out in your
Yeah.
storefront, right?
That's
Yep.
correct. Yes.
So, yeah, so I mean, it's people like that I want to support and help get their name out there, because I am one of those. I'm still trying to get my name out there, right? So I think in the different plans that we have, things come up. For example, COVID. Surprise! And so we have to learn that in our plans to not have plans. Does that make sense?
That's
Yep.
right.
What do
yes.
they say? The greatest way for God to laugh is for you to say you've got a plan, and that's when it all changes.
I love it. I love it.
You know, the object of the game is that your business is a ship. It's a huge ship. The bigger the ship, the bigger the business. And you have to be able to put that ship in deep waters as well as shallow waters. You
Right.
are the new pivot. The network that you're creating, that you ladies are putting together, that is the new pivot. It is a concept now that we're using on our concerts with J.C. Dreesen. It's a concept that we're got 501c3. We're working with Dumb More, because you have to be able to maneuver high tide and low tide. You have to be able to maneuver the ship without making the ship smaller. So you have become the pivot for us to increase the network so that people can see what's going on, and it's working. And we're showing Dawn the numbers this morning, and the numbers are growing, and they are getting more visibility because the content and the delivery has gotten better. And this is because we pivoted, had to pivot, during COVID, and we're using those concepts now.
Right, right. And when you pivot to, so my idea of pivoting in a business is, okay, what is working and what's not. So you throw away what's not working and you say, okay, where do I need to be in what is working? What do the viewers want? What do they need? Do they need resources? And that's why we decided to do this podcast, because people need resources,
Correct.
right?
Absolutely.
And I love your naval implications in that last. So, but that brings up a good point. Well, for me, is that it's Military Appreciation Month this month, and I forgot to mention it last week. But one of the hardest things for me was to transition or pivot from military life to civilian life. And I can imagine I've done a deployment, and it wasn't as long as some people's, but I can imagine it's that way for people coming back from a war zone, from people coming back from a deployment. I mean, some ships are out there for 9 months. You do a 9-month deployment or even a year-long deployment. How do you come back and integrate into your life, with your spouse? Your spouse has to integrate, or your significant other has to integrate as well, and pivot, because you're back, you're used to one thing and they're used to another. So one of the hardest thing for me was to find a job when I got out. And the stress of, I was a single mom. I was living in Virginia. My mom, I had to move back home to Michigan. I had to sell my house, sell whatever I wasn't taking with me, give my dog up because my mom wouldn't let me have my dog at the house, and move back in with my mom. And so, I mean, how do you do that? I think I went into autopilot and actually did it, just, did it. But now there are more resources for people who need it. For example, the VA is they've grown, they've pivoted with what the veterans need. For example, they have something called Solid Start, which the VA will call you, I think it's 3 times in a year, and they will help you with finding a job, your mental health, because that's very important after you transition, because it's a totally different life transitioning out from the military. And they will help returning to work. I said mental health. And what about home loans? If you guys, if you want to move back home and you want to buy a house, VA has their own home loan help. I can't think of the word. But usajobs.gov also helps with employment. So you have all these resources that need to be in one place. And I think that's where we pivoted, because we saw a need, right? You have all these resources, but they're everywhere. And when you don't know the right questions to ask, then you don't know the right questions to ask, and you're not going to get the right resources.
I think a lot of people don't know the right questions to ask and don't know where to find resources on so many things. Military Appreciation Month, right? Do they go to the VA? Even when you're looking at people that are veterans from, we were talking World War II and Korea and Vietnam, that are older and now need more health care benefits, where do they turn? Do they still turn to the VA? Because past lives, VA has not always had a positive connotation on caring for our vets in the health system. I think it's a lot better now, but it's getting over those old myths and the old stories and empowering them with new resources. as well as people now and women who are serving and what it's like for maternity leave and mental health. All of that is now has come into play. That wasn't anything that happened before. So there's a lot of things that I know you can bring light and awareness to, and I'm really excited that you have those resources and we can share them.
Yes, me too, because you touched on a few of the important ones that, well, they're all important, but the ones that have come to light the last couple years, for example, sexual trauma awareness and resources for that, because women being on the battlefield, and it happens with men too, but that sexual trauma is very important to address. We were talking, Chanel and I were talking, and I think we might have hit it on it a little bit last week, but we were talking, and those traumas that you experience, if you don't deal with them, or if you're not ready to deal with them, that's for you to work out with a professional. But if you're not dealing with them, that can have an impact on, say, your entrepreneurship. So
Yeah.
if you're telling yourself these things because of that trauma, so if you're telling yourself, I'm not good enough, I'm along those lines, right? All these negative thoughts, self-talk, right? If you're not dealing with that trauma's still there. And it will tell you in your subconscious that you're not good enough and you won't make it, you won't be successful, you can't do this. All of those negative talks. You may not be able to hear it in your own mind, but it's still there.
We gotta make it so that the veteran coming over, I mean, we've asked them to serve our country. We gotta make it so that when they come over, it's okay to seek help in that area. It's okay to ask, because a lot of vets, you got to remember, you're put through the military, and you're supposed to be there. You don't leave anybody behind, and you are the pillar of strength, and that is the viewpoint you have. Man, woman, coming back, they have to be able to say, "I need help." It's not easy for a vet to do that, so you have to make it. We have to pivot so that we welcome the vet back, and we say, "Listen, you don't even have to ask. If you need the help," and we do it in close quarters. I mean, a woman being assaulted, are they going to come forward? Think about this.
Right. Do people realize that they need support? I'm also thinking of that because you're so trained to be strong and stoic and be able to get through difficult circumstances. Do they even realize they may need the help, or do they want to seek the help? From your experience, what would you recommend?
I would start by asking the VA. Just call their number and just say, I'm having trouble in this area. Who can I talk to? What are my resources? And we are here to bring those resources forward for you. We may not touch on everything that you need, but just call the VA and say, hello. That's the first thing. And just ask, do you have anybody that will support me in, I'm having tremors? Who can I talk to about that? Or first, I think the first action would be to get involved in the VA first. Get your primary care physician, and that will be your pinpoint, right? And make sure you like the person. Make sure you click. If you don't click with your primary care physician, find another one. It's hard to find a good primary care physician. I've been looking for 20 plus years. And I have one. I had one, and she went to another specialty. She went to be in her specialty. But I do have another one that listens. Make sure they listen and don't dismiss you. Because that's your problems that you are telling your primary care physician, and they should listen. They have no idea what you're feeling inside or how your body is feeling. So I think that is the first thing to do, and then go from there.
Are there resources, Jennifer, for return to work to get a job stateside? If say you're serving in military and you're in the armed forces and you come back stateside, but there's no active war here, what type of job are you looking for? Are there resources for people to connect with? Maybe a job placement type of service that says, you're good at this. Let's see if we can put you here.
Yes, so I think the Solid Start that I mentioned earlier has a good resource for that. And they also have about your benefits. So if you're transitioning out of the military, I would suggest starting your VA benefit claim about 6 months before you separate. Also, along the jobs and employment is usajobs.gov. So you can apply for jobs online and wherever you want. There's some of the transition to civilian links that we have brought up for you. And these are, most of them except for the last one is VA. So you have a lot. So I'm not sure if the military your branch of military still has the Transition Assistance Program, TAP, but take the TAP class if it is offered to you and use those resources as well. They should have people coming in and offering their services for free. Do not pay for them, because most often there is a VA program or a program associated with the VA or the military that will help you transition for free.
What were some of the difficulties you had?
I think the biggest thing was moving and finding a job. That was my biggest, how am I going to do this? Your pay runs out. Most military families are living paycheck to paycheck. And so I was in Virginia, and I think that whole moving thing, I was selling my house. I was a single mom. What am I going to do when I get there? It was a little easier because I had my support system was my mom and my friends back home. So I had a place to live. I didn't have to worry about that. But lots of times people go back home and they don't have that support system, right? So that's another reason why we're bringing these resources forward, is for you to have that support system.
When I was growing up, I grew up in a military background. My uncle was a lifer for the Army. They finally gave him a store in Virginia because he kept re-enlisting. And they says, okay, you're 50, it's time, you're done. And they wouldn't say no, so they gave him a store, so he stopped re-enlisting, and he was a military store in Virginia. And Salty came home from Vietnam, Coco, all these guys came home from Vietnam. And we had a 6-bedroom apartment. And my mother used to put the kids up. She used to call them her kids because they had nowhere to go. And the transition, they used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I tell you, it was the scariest thing to watch Salty think he was in the jungles of Vietnam. He was hiding behind the sofas. He was carrying a mop around like it was a gun. And that's when my uncles got together and they said, we got to get this kid some help. And he ended up getting a Medal of Honor or a Badge of Honor or something for the fire department. He jumped into a fire building, went 6 floors crashing down with a lady on his chest and saved her life. But it's the type of mentality. My brother used to say to me, you don't understand a vet until you are a vet. And don't try to reinvent the wheel, because nothing's going to change us. We've been trained to be a certain way. And to bring them back to our society is not as simple as it sounds. But I'm glad you're saying that the help is there. I've always said to you, I have to do more for the vets as much as we can. And that's still not going to be enough for everything they've done to serve our country. So The work is there cut out for us. We have to do the pivot, and we got to make it large, and then you have to make the adjustments after you do the pivot to make it work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's hard because I was raised to be a strong woman because I'm from a long line of strong women. And then you put me in the military, and that just carries that mentality forward. So how am I going to ask for help,
Right.
if I don't know where to go, right?
Sure.
So, like you were saying, it's hard for people to ask for help. And that tradition of not talking about war when you come back. So, World War II, World War One, World War II, who talked about that when the men came back and the women? Nobody. My dad was in World War II. He never, well, okay, so across from a few of the stories that I heard, I never heard anything else. He was on a ship. He was on a landing craft, and he never talked about stuff like that. He talked about how bad his CO was, but that's about it, And the one story about the kamikaze flying right over the bow of the ship, but that was it.
In Vietnam, they didn't even want to talk about it. It was
Oh
always
no,
anti-war, and those vets
right?
that came, and there was a draft in those days, so you had
Yes,
to go whether or not you wanted to, or you went to
right.
jail. I mean, Muhammad Ali went to jail. He says, "No, I'm not gonna take the draft," but they took. Elvis Presley was drafted.
And what about
Yep.
your brother?
My brother enlisted, but the draft was not in play
But when he
anymore.
came back, what was it like for him?
Difficult. It was really difficult. It was hard to be a family man. Harry had changed. He was more disciplined, but the whole thing that he went through was just bizarre. And he was on he would be on the ship where there was nuclear stuff on it, and there was a
Reactors.
big fire, and they all separated and left them alone because if that thing went up, there would have been a hole in the Atlantic, and they had to figure out how to turn it off. So he didn't come back the way he left. But nonetheless, that just made us group together as a family to give him the support. But not a lot of these guys and women that come back have that. They just don't have that. They come back. It makes me laugh because I look at the Rambo movies and it brings me a tear because I know it's a movie, but the point he's trying to make is so real. They just sometimes feel forgotten, and they went to serve their
Absolutely.
country, and to feel forgotten and not have a country anymore, it's the saddest thing in the world. That's lonely quadrupled.
Now, this is
It
a show
is.
into itself, Jennifer. There's so many more things to touch on. We just got to figure out how to get more exposure for these resources. So maybe we can put the slide up again and do a part 2 next week.
Yes, absolutely. So people who are viewing this, get ready to take a screenshot and use this for your own resources. That's what it's up there for. And we will be bringing more next week, like Dawn said. And this was a great conversation. I love to have conversations with people like this because it really emphasizes different perspectives and different, people, non-military background and military background, different perspectives bring different questions. So let's be a little nicer to people and listen to their perspectives. So we are glad you joined us today. And if you have any questions, please drop us a line at beachjammedia@gmail.com. That's 2 M's. And you can join us every Wednesday at 11 a.m. And if you can't join us, then join us live. Then you can catch the replay on YouTube. And put your comments down below and let us know how you liked it and share it with a vet or anybody that you think is can use this channel as a resource. But I guess that's it for this week. So we will see you next week at the beach.
Thank you for tuning in to Beach Jam Media with your host, Jennifer Corbin-Carson. We hope today's dive into hot topics and valuable resources left you feeling refreshed and inspired. Our mission is to keep you informed and engaged as we ride the waves of what washes up in life together. Until next time, stay curious, keep the conversation flowing, ask questions, and let the glisten of the shoreline guide your journey. Goodbye.